Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. Travis Scott was once upon a time the collab king, and today's topic is whether he is now canceled. Are all of these brands going to drop him like a hot potato and run far, far, far away in the wake of the Astroworld tragedy? As always, if you're enjoying the content, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. As always, we start with a lawyer joke. This one has a special place in my heart because I went to law school in New York. Do you know why New York is full of lawyers and New Jersey is full of toxic waste? New Jersey got first pick. All right, so here's your video overview. First, we're going to do a brief comment review. Second, we're going to talk about morals clauses and what some of these clauses might mean for Travis Scott's endorsements and collabs going forward. And third, we're going to talk about some details of a live stream that we're going to do coming up. My first comment today is from Blue Lotus. Blue Lotus says, what people fail to understand is that all large concert venues and movie TV productions have specialized on-set production walkie-talkies and ear monitors. There is always communication amongst the production crew as well as the ability to communicate to the performer. The claims that Scott and the production company did not know what was going on are ridiculous. Now, I don't know for certain whether this is the case or not, but two things. Number one, Blue Lotus seems like he or she knows what they're talking about. This is written like someone with some industry knowledge. Number two, this kind of a system seems very reasonable and in fact, perhaps negligent not to have this system. So again, as I've said in 3, 4, 5 videos by this point, how do you not know? How on earth do you not know? Next question comes from Princess Odonata asking whether there might have been some sort of corporate pressure to keep the stream going. I don't know, but you're getting at a good point and something that some of the plaintiff attorneys have alleged, namely that Apple Music was involved in some way. I haven't seen any evidence that would indicate that, but if they are, talk about a deep pocket, that's next level deep pocket. All right, next question's from Anna Garcia, and I've gotten a similar comment in the last few videos. Would love to hear a Q&A sort of video, top 10 questions from your subscribers, any kind of questions allowed. I'm gonna try this live stream thing. We're gonna talk about that in part 3, the when, where, and how, etc. of that. I have no idea if it'll work. I hope it will, maybe it won't, we'll see. As for any kinds of questions, I mean, yeah, the questions are allowed. There are some questions that I'm not gonna be able to answer, but sure, the questions are allowed. Next up, we've got a couple of comments clarifying that in the last clip that I showed, the two maybe I think I described them as maybe fans who came up on stage and did the stage dive after saying something to Travis Scott were actually not fans, they were employees or hype men, and that was a choreographed stage dive. In fact, I think that probably makes what they said to Travis Scott even more relevant, and one of them has allegedly released a TikTok video saying that he didn't know about anything of the hurt fans, and he was just talking to Travis about the stage dive. I'll bet you there's a record of that on the recordings of those little earpieces that our first commenter was talking about, but we'll see. All right, so part 2 of this video, we're gonna talk about the collab king and what may happen to some of his endorsements, specifically in the light of this tragedy, what some of those morals clauses might say. Now, you may have noticed some of the news in the wake of this tragedy. Nike has postponed his shoe. Hulu has removed a Travis Scott documentary. The Houston Rockets have canceled Travis Scott Night. Fortnite has removed his emotes and skin and whatever, I don't play Fortnite, from their store. Mega64 has publicly announced that their deal with him is terminated. Both the Parsons School of Design and McDonald's have both publicly indicated their deals with him are no longer active. And W Magazine has rushed to try to pull its issues from the shelves because the cover of that magazine featured Travis Scott and Kylie Jenner, and they're panicking over the PR disaster. In addition, a couple of these deals, most notably Nike, which is a postponement, at least for now, as well as Dior, who has a whole line about Cactus Jack that has collaborated with Travis Scott, those have not been formally canceled. So we're going to talk about how some of those might get canceled, specifically what is a morals clause. First, we're going to talk about a little bit of the history of morals clauses. Second, we're going to talk about some examples of morals clauses. And third, we're going to speculate about what some of those in Travis Scott's contract might say. So first of all, let's talk about the history of a morals clause and what this is. As long as brand endorsements by celebrities and athletes and etc. have been around, celebrities and athletes and etc. have been misbehaving. So what's going to happen here? Well, these companies are not going to follow the rules of a court of law. So why the Do you care what I have to say? Just kidding. These companies are not going to follow the rules of court of law. These companies are businesses, and they're going to protect their bottom dollar. And what the question is going to come down to for them is, does associating with Travis Scott make us money or lose us money? And according to that question, they're going to determine the future of their collaborations and partnerships, etc. with him. Does it make us money or does it lose us money? The end, law of the jungle. So let's talk about the origins of morals clauses and the history of some of this stuff. So as long as celebrities and athletes and etc. have been doing endorsements and have been signing their names on and stuff like that, those same celebrities and athletes have been misbehaving. So let's turn the clock back all the way back to 1921. We're talking about the case of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. Now, this was a guy who was a star of silent films, right? That's how far back in history we're going, before movies had sound. So Fatty Arbuckle was involved in a big scandal involving allegations of a sex party and possible rape. A woman died as a result of this alleged sex party and possible rape. And as a result, Universal Studios, who was still around back then, Universal Studios started putting morals clauses in all of its contracts with all of its performers from movies from then on out. So the case of Fatty Arbuckle is famous not only for the scandal that was involved back at the time, but also for generating this little interesting legal tidbit. 1 year later, you saw the first morals clause pop up in sports. Babe Ruth had a reputation, a big party guy, big drinker, womanizer, all of that. So he signed a contract that had a morals clause in it that said that he promised not to drink liquor or quote unquote misbehave, whatever that means. So fast forward to today, virtually every high profile employment contract, be it actors, big football coaches, athletes, that kind of thing, or big endorsement contracts, virtually all of them have some sort of morals clause involved that says you're not going to go out and do something that brings public disrepute upon the people that you're associated with. So let's read a couple of the example morals clauses that I was able to pull, with the caveat that these are just examples. Whatever the contract is between Travis Scott and Nike, or whatever the contract is between Travis Scott and Dior, or Travis Scott and whoever, that's all private. I don't know what that contract says, but I pulled 5 examples and we're going to read what those 5 examples say. From those 5 examples, you may be able to make an educated guess about what the morals clauses of his contracts might say. So let's look at the first example here. And what this morals clause says is, neither the consultant nor the consultant's representative nor the consultant's key personnel shall commit any act or do anything which might reasonably be considered to be immoral, deceptive, scandalous, or obscene, to injure, tarnish, damage, or otherwise negatively affect the community under representation and goodwill associated with blank. If the consultant, the consultant representative, or key personnel is accused of any act involving moral or ethical issues, dishonesty, theft, or misappropriation, then they have the right to terminate the contract. Now, one thing that I want you to note here is that this does not say if you're convicted of an act of dishonesty, theft, or et cetera, et cetera. It says if you are accused of an act of dishonesty, theft, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of these morals clauses, they happen not based on any kind of conviction. They happen based on the accusation, based on the public bringing forward of these charges, of which arguably that's already happened in Travis Scott's case. So let's look at the second morals clause here. This one says, for any given event, blank shall have the right to require a licensor to replace a blank to engage in conduct which might be deemed a violation of this morals clause. For purposes of this agreement, a blank shall be deemed to have violated the morals clause of this agreement if a blank at any time after the date agreement is 1, charged with committing a misdemeanor. Again, there it is. We're not talking about convicted of a misdemeanor. We're saying charged of a misdemeanor. It's the accusation that triggers the morals clause of moral turpitude that is punishable by a prison term of at least 6 months or a felony, et cetera, et cetera. Now, moral turpitude, this is another one of these naughty legal phrases, K-N-O-T-T-Y, not N-A-U-G-H-T-Y. It's a kind of a naughty legal phrase that has some specific meanings where it's beyond the scope of this video. We're not going to talk about it, but that's an interesting phrase. You could read a lot about it if you wanted to. Commits or is accused of committing an act involving moral turpitude. There it is again, under federal, state, or local law. Violates terms of any parole or probation with such blank is or may become subject. So again, this morals clause triggers based on the mere accusation of bad conduct. It does not require a conviction. So again, in this case, Travis Scott might have already triggered the morals clause, and the party on the other side of those contracts may be able to exercise it if they feel like they want to. Here's a third example of a morals clause. Licensee understands at all times or in the terms of the agreement, licensee shall conduct itself at all times with due regard for the public convention and morals, and to refrain from any behavior that may be objectionable to licensor. So let's talk about this language. Objectionable to licensor is a subjective standard. That says if I find it to be objectionable, then I can terminate, right? That doesn't say if the general public finds it to be objectionable. That doesn't say if a jury finds it to be objectionable. This says if I don't like what you're doing, then the morals clause triggers. And again, the contract could be written like this, where it's in the sole discretion of the person on the other side of that contract, where they judge whether the conduct is objectionable or not. If that's the case, it triggers if they want it to trigger. There's really no objective standard in this case. It's entirely subjective. So here's another example of a morals clause. This clause says that blank's conduct shall be with due regard to the public conventions on morals, and blank has not done and shall not do or commit any act that will degrade him before a substantial portion of society or bring him into public hatred. If blank shall materially breach, licensee may terminate. Now, bring him into public hatred. What does that mean? Is Travis Scott in public hatred? Maybe. Based on the comments of some of these videos that I've been making, I would say he's definitely in public hatred. Would that be enough to trigger a morals clause like this and allow the other party to terminate? Very possibly. All right, here's your fifth and final example of a morals clause here. And this one says that if at any time in the opinion of licensee, there it is again, this is a subjective standard. This is not in the opinion of a judge. This is not in the opinion of a jury. This is not in the opinion of the public at large. This is in the opinion of licensee, an opinion of that party to the contract. If I think it is in my brain, then it is, right? That's another subjective standard. Property becomes the subject of public disrepute, contempt, or scandal that affects licensee's image, reputation, products, or goodwill, including but not limited to, blah, 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 blah. Licensee may, upon written notice, licensor immediately suspend or terminate this agreement. Now, what does public disrepute, contempt, or scandal mean? And what does affecting licensee's image, reputation, products, or goodwill mean? Those are both incredibly broad and could mean almost anything. In a lot of cases, these morals clauses might allow the other party to terminate on very, very small grounds, right? And they're written broadly on purpose to give someone a whole lot of latitude to terminate the contract if they want to. So let's read the tea leaves a little bit and do a little bit of amateur mind reading. So first of all, I do not have a crystal ball. I do not have magic powers. I cannot predict an outcome with 100% certainty. That being said, what I think is probably going on when Nike says that the collaboration is on pause or pushed back or suspended or that kind of thing, that probably means we're waiting to see what the public fallout from this is. And in the meantime, our lawyers are writing a 50-page memo on how we can get out of that contract if we want to. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dior and some of these other collaborators are doing the same thing of how can we get out of this contract if we decide that it's economically beneficial for us to do so. Now, based on what the public continues to react to this Travis Scott tragedy, and based on $3 billion in lawsuits or something absurd like that, I think probably you'll see some terminations going forward. I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think you'll probably see some terminations. I'd be surprised if you didn't. Being associated with Travis Scott before was a surefire pass to allowance money and all kinds of social media clout, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's a surefire way to be associated with a mass casualty event and all kinds of liability. I don't see those brands wanting to bring that kind of image to their stuff. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Part 3 of the video, we're going to try to do a live stream. That's going to be this Sunday at 11 a.m. Central Time. I'm going to shoot for half an hour. I've never done a live stream before. I have no idea if more than 2 people are going to show up for this. If I can even figure out how to turn a live stream on, I'm going to call that a victory. If you have questions that you want to make it into the live stream and you can't make the time, you can go put them on my Facebook or Instagram page. It's @LawReifert for the handle for both of those. If you do want to drop into the live stream, a couple of ground rules. Number 1, if you disagree with me, great. I want to hear from you. When people who disagree can have a civil discussion with reasonable, not insulting each other, that's where democracy lives. However, if you decide to be a troll, I reserve the right to troll you back. Number 2, I can't give you legal advice. Don't ask. As always, if you have any other comments or questions, feel free to drop me an email, comment, whatever. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and take care. We'll see you next time.